This is Roll Call for this edition of African Drums. The African drums are sounding.
Good evening. Welcome to this week's edition of African Drums, the television organ of the Cuffy 250 Committee, an organization dedicated to the empowerment of the African Guyanese community through education and the encouragement of self-activity. I am Elsie and I will be your host for this evening's program. We are continuing our series on education under the theme, Education Still Matters. We have talked about the challenges that education and the education system in Guyana has faced from emancipation to the present, and about the role that communities can play in supplementing the formal education system or coming to the rescue of its children when the formal system is not delivering on its mandate or is under stress. In that regard, just today, the Cuffy 250 Committee held a forum on education in Stanleytown on the West Bank, Demerara. One of our guests was a speaker at that forum, and we'll talk about that a little later in the program. On this edition of African Drums, we turn our attention to tertiary education. What is the state of tertiary education in Guyana? Of course, many of you are quite familiar with the woes of the University of Guyana. Substandard physical conditions and a shortage of lecturers are just two of the problems that are more publicized. But what are the other issues that the university faces? How do these impact on the quality of educational output? Are there positives amongst or despite the negatives? Who are more impacted by what is happening or what is not happening at the University of Guyana? Then there is the case of the Critchlow Labour College, which has over the years played a major role in opening doors to higher education for mainly the poor and the underprivileged. The removal of the government subvention from the college is well known, but what is not so well known is the impact on that action on the ability of the college to deliver on its mandate and consequently on opportunities for poor people. What does all of this mean for Guyana, for poor people, and for African Guyanese? Cuffy 250 wants to find out and wants you, the general public, to embrace this matter of education as a national emergency. It should be addressed by all of us, administrators, teachers, students, parents, business people, and church people. For us in the Cuffy 250 Committee, the right to a quality but affordable education is a human right. It is in this context that this evening we engage three guests who are well qualified to speak on the issues. Brian Smith is a second-year international relations student at the University of Guyana. Mr. Aubrey Norton is a political activist, former lecturer at the University of Guyana, and current administrator at the Critchlow Labour College. Mr. Freddie Kissoon is a popular newspaper columnist and was also a former lecturer at the University of Guyana for nearly 3 decades. Gentlemen, welcome to African Drums, where this evening the drum roll signals a time for education, information, analysis, and a call to social action. Welcome.
Thank you.
The first question I want to pose to all of our panelists is, what is the state of tertiary education in Guyana? Mr. Smith, would you like to begin?
All right. Thank you again, Ms. Elsie. Firstly, talking about the University of Guyana, being a second-year student, from what I've experienced, the first word that comes to my mind is malaise. We have a university that should be producing the intelligent, the intelligentsia. And as far as I'm concerned, we're producing an intelligentsia that is graduated in apathy. All right? I wouldn't be able to speak on Critchlow Labour College, all right?
Yes.
But there are certain things that I expect from a university. At the university, you're taught the ideals, You see the realities, and you're expected, that's what I think, to come up with the solutions yourself. When the University of Guyana lost its accreditation for the medical school, I would have expected that my colleagues, as friends, should have shut the university down. When the University of Guyana, the placement of our law students was put in jeopardy, I expected that our student body, irrespective of whether or not you're in the law faculty or should have shut the campus down and let our society, our leaders know that this affects us as students. We're not proactive anymore. We are no longer the thrust of our nation. Mind you, university is supposed to be molding the next generation of the Guyanese man. That Guyanese individual who is tasked with building the nation, continuing the nation. It is towards the university students to whom the nation is bequeathed to when our elders and leaders would have left. So I find that the general state of malaise for students, general state of malaise affects staff. And this is just like our society. The university is a microcosm of our society.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Mr. Kissoon?
Well, I think it is emotional subject for me. That's because the University of Guyana was my savior. I think if there wasn't the University of Guyana, I probably would have ended up on the bad side of life, given where I came from. I'm from South Georgetown, in a very depressed area, and I scraped up my 5 GC, and that got me into the UG, and from there on I never looked back. So UG has something special, a special occupation, not only in my heart and mind, but essentially in my psyche, because I think UG saved me from disappearance, from non-existence. And the subject of UG is always emotional for me, but I'll try to be analytical tonight. I think tertiary education has become a very, very tragic victim of the political tribal competition of this land that is outside of the scope to discuss this evening. But I will just close this section by saying there's a little fact, there's a little historical fact that has not been mentioned when we're discussing UG and when we're discussing education. And that is one of the first things that Dr. Jagan did as president after 1992. He scrapped duty-free cars for UG lecturers. That has been there since the university was in the PNC days. That was significant, and I thought that was the first major manifestation that tertiary education is going to become a weapon in this tribal politics. Tragically and fortunately, it has, and we're witnessing the not so-called or about to die, but we're really talking about the demise of UG. If you are going to seriously describe what are the criteria for a university, I'm afraid UG has lost those criteria. But we'll come back to empowerment for the African people vis-a-vis tertiary education.
Most definitely. Mr. Norton?
Well, I believe a university could only be as good as the education in the system producing students that are good. And to the extent that the wider educational system is in trouble, to that extent the University of Guyana stands little or no chance. I don't see the University of Guyana standing alone. It has to be part of the education system. I lectured at the university. I have a lot of emotional attachment. I share the same view as Freddie. I came from Christianburg, where it's kind of a depressed community, and I went to the University of Guyana, and when I went to England and so to study, I felt the University of Guyana did a good job for me because we were ahead of many of the students in the developed world. But unfortunately, I think the education system started to produce young people that are not the quality we used to have. They're not as analytical. They can't write like we used to write. And sadly, the discipline that goes with academia is also going. And so, as a consequence, the University of Guyana finds itself in this dilemma. Add to that the absence of resources. You can't run a university and not give it the resources required. And one has to acknowledge that there's been a marked failure in terms of delivering the kind of resources that are required to run a university in this modern world. And then I think the university got involved in something that's very questionable. It appeared to me that we started to lower the requirements to get into the university rather than seek to bring the people who were having problems up. And as a consequence, you have a lower quality of person going into the university. Now, don't get me wrong, there are always going to be exceptional students who do well regardless of the system. But I'm talking here about the general student population and where the system impacts negatively on the general student population and therefore impacts on the University of Guyana in a negative way. So in my opinion, I agree with Freddie that it's a reflection also of the political tribalism in the society. But I would add to that, it seems to me to be a function also of a group of people who govern a society who seem not to understand the importance of the independence of a university and the importance of a university functioning in a way that can make it an academic institution. And I think that, added to the problems you would have mentioned, place the University of Guyana on the slope down to the lowest end.
You're also an administrator at Critchlow Labour College. Can you comment on the state of tertiary education there as well?
Well, Critchlow is no different in the sense that the students that are coming to Critchlow are from the same education system we're talking about. However, I believe that Critchlow has some other problems. One of them is a political problem. For whatever reason, the government decided that Critchlow will not be financed by the state. And in the bad arrangement that was being made by the parliamentary parties, it appears to me that they were prepared to give resources to Critchlow if the government took it over. Because the arrangement they made to me was a backdoor to taking over, a backdoor avenue to taking over the Critchlow Labour College. Having said that, I think Critchlow Labour College, once properly managed, can deliver education at a fairly high level and allow students do the kind of remedial work that will allow students to move on to the university with a much better base. And I strongly believe, in fact, when I agreed to go to the Critchlow Labour College, I knew it had no funds, etc. But I felt that there was a market out there, and that if properly marketed, we can get students to come to the Critchlow Labour College. And once you put in place all the mechanisms to ensure a quality education, exams of integrity, etc., then the college can take off. In the 8 months, we've seen the population move from about 20 students to close to 200. Wow. And we have another set of students coming in shortly. Additionally, I think what needs to be recognized is that a college like Critchlow can do professional training and contribute to the workplace and other areas by giving them training in management, which we're doing at present, and let it develop. But Critchlow Labour College needs to be given the scope, and for people to recognize that one minister said bluntly in the parliament that only black people go to Critchlow. That is not true. At Critchlow, there are other ethnic groups. But I think the government, in the way they handle it, sends signals to the Indian community that Critchlow is not the place for you. I can tell you of a sad experience we had. We had to actually move a man from in front of the college who came from a particular place in this country and telling students they shouldn't go to Critchlow Labour College. They should really be going to IPED, and he named a number of other places. So there's that battle, but having said all of that, I think the college is well placed to take off and to play its role in the education system, cognizant of the problems we get from the wider education system.
Okay, now that we've established the state of tertiary education in Guyana, the Malays, according to Brian, that it is a victim of political tribalism, limited resources, etc. How does this affect the quality of educational output that you receive from these institutions? Brian, you're a student, so you'd have first-hand information on how this works. So can you take this question for us?
Well, because of the apathy, because of the disinterest, we have students graduating for export. We have students who are at the university for their time, for their 4 years, for their 6 years, just so as to leave. So we have a culture having been created of which they enjoy, of which they participate, and of which they don't affect. There is no, as I said earlier, proactive injection. There is just this complacency, this I'm going to get my degree finished and over with, and that's it. Which I do not believe contributes to the nation positively. All right? Last week, there was a discussion about university and what goes on. And this apathy is not just with students, it was even with staff. Because an incident was reported of going to the university staff to get information as a student. And you can't get it. Because the Malays is at the student level and also at the staff level. That frustration doesn't bode well, doesn't help.
Mr. Kissoon, you were a member of staff at the University of Guyana for several years.
26. Yeah.
26 years, to be exact. So, what are your comments on the educational output?
Well, I don't want this program to finish without me zeroing on the raison d'etre of your committee, Cuffy 250 committee,
yes,
and its emphasis on empowering African through education. I believe that African leaders in this country, and I think some people watching this program will say, how can this Indian boy criticize? But I'm no Indian guy. I'm a trained human being, trained to look at things in society. I don't know where the Indian come in. So I'm an academic talking about a group of African leaders. I think African leaders in this country are very much afraid to frontally accuse the political system of disenfranchising African Guyanese. And I think they're afraid to do that for two reasons. They're afraid to be called by important stakeholders in society racist. Because I think once African people open their mouth and point to discrimination, they face the label of, oh, you're a racist. I mean, someone like David Hines, who has a Takuma Ogunse, who actual praxis have led to the PPP being in power now. If they weren't struggling for free Guyana, I've been accused of racist. So I think African has this fear. They don't want to go in that direction. The second reason why they don't want to do it is because I think they genuinely feel philosophically that we're going to alienate Indian people by saying this and we all have to live together. But I seriously believe that the assault on tertiary education is not incidental. I think it's a deliberate method as part of our tribalism. I just give one example. What does Critchlow have in common with UG? Critchlow have in common with UG the empowerment through education of African people. Tell me how much percentage, I know Robert Prasad went to Critchlow, but tell me how much percentage of Indians go to Critchlow, and where is the demographic location of Critchlow students? They're all people with a certain type of weakness after they have left high school, and a lot from South Georgetown. Now you want to tell me the government has been in power for 22 years, and you cannot see the correlation where each year in those 22 years, UG's resources go down and down. So we in the 22nd year of the government's rule, and in that year, UG has a whopping $40 million plus bill to pay. Workers are not getting their salary in time. NIS contributions are not being paid. GRA contributions are not being paid. Now surely that kind of pattern tells you something. And I believe the Critchlow withdrawal, the subsidy of Critchlow, the continued degradation of UG is part of this government's confrontation with African people. I can say it without the fear of being labeled a racist, because I really don't care. But I'm wearing my academic hat. It's for the African leaders to say, no, we don't want to go in that direction. I have gone in that direction. I think if you're going to save UG, if you're going to save Critchlow, then you have to talk seriously about changes in our political system.
Okay. You have something to say on the same?
I would prefer if Freddie say most African leaders, because there are those who...
That's given us
For instance, I think I've been very blunt to say there has been racial discrimination in this society. And so I don't have a problem saying it, because whenever I say it, I provide the evidence. And the evidence will suggest that the government has the tendency to act in a way that disempowers the African Guyanese community. Education is just one area. But having said that, I went to the Critchlow Labour College because I believe there's little or no sense in crime. What you have to do is to organize, to transform it into an institution that continues to empower Guyanese of all ethnic groups, because no one is prevented from going there, but not being ashamed or afraid of the fact that a large percentage of the people that go there are African Guyanese. Now, I also believe that it is an institution that provides a second chance opportunity. And from that standpoint, I think it's an institution that we have to do everything to save and ensure that it succeeds. And that is what I wanted to say, basically.
Okay, while we're on the issue of Critchlow Labour College, we've identified that it has similar problems like the University of Guyana. And Mr. Kissoon mentioned that the government subvention was removed, as well as I mentioned it in the introduction. So, Mr. Norton, where does the funding for Critchlow Labour College come from?
The students. The truth of the matter is that we have developed some approaches that allow the students to come to the college and pay for their education. We put mechanisms in place so that they don't become a burden. I can give you, for example, the fee for the 1-year course used to be like $80,000, and what we do is say give us $7,000 a month, so students can pay the management course. It's $4,000 to $5,000 for the 3 months. We say $15,000 a month. What we have attempted to do is to make it some easy payment plan, and to advertise so that the student, people know what is happening and come to the college. And I can say to you, without fear of successful contradiction, that it has worked so far. We are not out of the woods, but we have a situation where the students are getting a fairly good quality education. All the lecturers are qualified lecturers, and I think with time we can develop the college and make it into a viable institution. And that for me is what is most important. When I arrive at that stage, I can go back on my retirement.
Okay, Mr. Norton, while I'm speaking with you, you were a speaker at the Education Forum held by the Cuffy 250 Committee in Stanleytown today. Can you tell us about the feedback from the people in Stanleytown about the state of education in Guyana?
Well, Stanleytown is an African community.
Yes.
And a lot of people bemoan the fact that the resources that go into other communities, for instance, a comparison was made with Lenore's school and Stanleytown. And again, the African Guyanese, they believe that a lot of the resources are being placed into the Indo-Guyanese community, and a similar level of resources are not being placed into the African Guyanese community. The general approach we took was that, look, the community has to do something to deal with this situation. Of course, we will protest the discrimination, etc., but that there is a role for the students. We have to sensitize them and make them interested in education. There's a role for the parents who have got to recognize the importance of education and do what is required. There's a role for the teacher, and that we need to set up within the villages organizations that will help the young people in those villages to grasp education and to utilize it as a means of empowerment. But the general sentiment expressed is that people understand the importance of education, but are concerned that the system seems to be stacked against them.
Okay. In addition to the African Guyanese communities, what other minority groups do you think are affected most by the problems at the University of Guyana?
Well, I think your telescope cannot miss the Amerindians. I mean, the Amerindians suffer from a disadvantage in demography, where they are, their economy, etc. But you also have to look at it in terms of numbers. Per capita, there are more poor Africans and Indians suffering from the breakdown of education than Amerindians. I mean, the latest, what you call it, those results that you go into Queen's College when you, we used to call it common entrance, right?
Secondary school entrance
right.
exam.
That the result of that thing is extremely horrible. Is that the cream of those people came from Georgetown and Region 4, with a sprinkling from Region 3 and 6. What happened to those? And this has been the pattern all the time. But I would like to go back to the theme that if African people are going to be saved in this country, and African people have always dominated the education system. You know, it's ironic that some people should turn a blind eye to what is going on with education, when all of us who have achieved some prominence in this country, most Indians, were taught by African headmasters and African teachers. I mean, at my primary school, we never had an Indian teacher. But I want to alert the Guyanese people to the danger that UG just one day we're going to wake up. I'm telling you, one day we're going to wake up and find that that place has closed, because it just haven't got the resources to be a functional high school. I mean, my heart breaks to know that the Caribbean Reference Library is now defunct.
It is?
Yeah, it's no longer in operation.
Well, I used to consider it to be one of the better libraries we could have gone into.
Yeah.
Okay. Viewers, you are watching African Drums, the television organ of the Cuffy 250 Committee. We'll take a short break. Please stay tuned.
Want to improve your education? Don't have enough subjects to get into university? Don't worry. The Critchlow Labour College is offering the Certificate in Industrial and Social Studies for less than $1,500 per week. And we have a payment plan to make the one-year course affordable. This certificate qualifies you to enter the Social Science faculty at UG, Cyril Potter College of Education, and other institutions of higher learning. You need to enroll now. Get your application forms from the Critchlow Labour College. Register now. Course will be Mondays through Thursdays from 5:15 to 9 p.m. Telephone 226-2483.
This is Roll Call for this edition of African Drums.
Welcome back to African Drums, the television organ of the Cuffy 250 Committee. If you are just joining us, we are discussing the state of tertiary education in Guyana with our panelists, Mr. Brian Smith, second-year international relations student at the University of Guyana, Mr. Aubrey Norton, administrator at Critchlow Labour College and former lecturer at the University of Guyana, and Mr. Freddie Kissoon, newspaper columnist and also former lecturer at the University of Guyana. Before the break, we discussed issues that were faced at both the University of Guyana and at the Critchlow Labour College. And now that we're back from the break, I want to engage, first of all, Mr. Smith, because you are a student at the University of Guyana, to talk about some of the positives that exist at the University of Guyana.
All right. I think that the struggle makes you a better student. I believe that having to go through all of the negatives, it teaches you to be resourceful given the limited resources. It teaches you to understand that there's a term that was used recently, in effect, that even if you pay for something, that reasonable expectation, if you pay for a course or to do your program, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to collect the service with the program, right? So you learn that you need to be very patient and tolerant so that you don't stress yourself too much. And as such, I believe when students would have completed university, the majority of whom would have migrated, the few who would actually stay, have been tempered. And as such, are able to function in society to some extent. Not the extent that I would wish, or I think that any purposeful student should. Because I would rather a university student try to solve the problem, if it's energy security, food security, and fail at it. But at least the learning curve would have increased. The university student, the nation would have known what not to do. And for us to not try at all, have our cheap degree, and leave. So I think out of it all, the university student is tempered, given the resources and the lack of facilities and all the problems that UG has.
And do you think that this temperance that is taught adds to the malaise that you spoke about earlier? So then is it a cycle?
Well, yes, because we've become so temperate that we accept it as it is. There is no desire to change. If this is what it is, and this is what it is. We continue, we have our journey in it, and we get out, we enter the society with the same attitude. No fire, no thrust, no desire to change, having learned all the philosophies, no idea to get out there and get things done, change our society, improve our society, make things better. We're the ones who have to inherit the nation. We're the ones who will be the next leaders. We'll be the next teachers for our children. Are we going to teach our children to be apathetic as well? We will just continue society and complain that, oh, our society is as it was 50 years ago, 20 years ago, except for a few facades. So I believe that yes, it does contribute to the malaise and the continuing of that cycle of malaise. That's why we can accept GPL giving us blackouts, even though you pay you pay the end of the month, because no university student looks at our situation, our energy needs, and figures out a plan. How are we going to solve it? How are we going to get it done? How are we going to stop it? No student, engineering student, comes up with a plan. How are we going to get our hydropower plant in order? We're comfortable waiting on some other international agency to come and spend some money. It is better that we try as Guyanese and fail, as far as I'm concerned, and not try at all.
Okay.
You know, what you said to me really affects me, in the sense that I think the worst thing that happened to the university student is they lost their inquiring mind. When I was a university student and you walked down the corridor of the university, and Freddie could attest to this, there was always a debate on some issue, even in the corridors. You gain the impression when you walk down the university corridor that it's not an academic institution. There is no debate on any issue, and people are well prepared to regurgitate something rather than analyze anything. And so I worry, because even if you put them in GPL or anyway, they didn't come out of a culture of questioning and querying and checking against reality to see theoretical inconsistencies. And so to me, the university is contributing to what I call the implementation deficit in this country. It is not training people to analyze, look at the problems, see the strengths, see the weaknesses, come up with a plan and then implement, which is what a university should be doing.
Correct.
So to me, even, let us put the absence of resources aside. The basic thing of a university student being an inquiring person is absent. And that to me is the greatest danger, because they are not going to question anything, and therefore anything can be given to them, and they'll accept it. And the society, they will go out into the society, and when they get into the society, anything is put to them and they will accept it. What that means is that which exists will continue, and we're in deep trouble.
I agree.
Okay, so we see that there are two sides to every coin. Temperance, as a benefit for somebody, might not be a benefit for someone else. Mr. Kissoon, what are some of the positives at the University of Guyana?
Well, I'm not too sure, speaking philosophically, a process need to have a certain amount of positives and negatives. Historically, a process can just have negatives. And in a situation like Guyana, the positives would be more subjective than objective. A good example is a policeman throw you in Bagdam for 3 days and 3 nights for no reason. The positives you take from that would be subjective. You got to see prisoners who were wronged. You got a sense of how the police are unjust. You got a sense of the class basis of police brutality, etc. So those are the positives, but that's the positive you take from it as a subjective process. I really cannot, in my mind, in the few minutes I have, search my mind thoroughly to come up with a set of positives. I think one of the positives would be, for me, is the level to which people could endure mediocrity, be part of mediocrity, and yet survive. And it goes to show, therefore, the human being has an immense capacity for tolerance and suffering. And when you go to the technology faculty and you see not one lab that is on par with a high school in the Caribbean, and you're standing on university ground, and you can then endure 4 years of that university, to me that's the positive. But I think the university has so badly broken down that I don't know what negative positive you can take for it. Let me give you what I consider a damning indictment of the University of Guyana, its staff and its students. The university that I've been to in the 70s had about 300, 400, 500 students. Let's put it at 6, 7. The university today has 2,500 students. What has happened is that students from all areas of Region 4 are now coming to UG, particularly from the East Coast. At UG, we used to have a shuttle bus coming, leaving until 11 in the night. Now, what those East Coast students do, they stop off at where the Biharis live, and you have a $20 private shuttle. You know what the Biharis did? The Biharis stopped. Now, if you know how large the Bihari estate is, from the Atlantic Public Road, it goes way down. The Biharis stopped the shuttle from parking there, and some of us got involved. I went to the Sparendam station and said, "Why did you stop?" And the Sparendam police said, "That was the order of Henry Green." So the Biharis went and got Green to move those shuttle. Those people, you should see how those shuttle people, every time they see a police pass, they run. And this was serving the University of Guyana. You know what the Biharis have done now? They have now paved, not paved, cordoned off that entire strip. So the shuttle has to go over that side, and there isn't space for them. And I brought up that thing at the academic board, at my faculty board, and it has got worse. A private family can tell a university that its shuttle cannot park on government people's land for university students to get in there. You know, it's just an indictment of what UG has become. Just go there. If you're looking at this program, pass it tomorrow and see. The Biharis have cut off the whole thing. The shuttle have to be on the western side of the UG access road, and with this rainy season, there's no way for them to pass.
There are also some deeper problems with the university. One of the things that really had me when I was at university was that you put to teach a class of 900 students. I never understand the logic of taking in 900 students and you teach them in one class. Apart from the fact that you can't pay any attention to them, it is unmanageable. And even when you brought tutorial tutors to help, there were difficulties. I believe the university has to operate within the context of Guyana's needs. And therefore there is need for a proper study as to what is required out there, and then adapt the student intake to suit those needs and provide the resources so that the students can benefit. Take local government. I don't believe there is money available at the university for students in politics to study the local government system. What it means is that they will do local government, but they will come out the university without any practical engagement of the system. And so the mediocrity that characterizes leadership in this country flows down to the university. There is a serious problem of leadership in this society. Now, a lot of the people who find themselves in policy positions don't formulate policy. They waste time in trivial details. And so you don't even have clear policy positions on the university. In policy terms, what does this university set out to do? Who does it is intended to benefit? So to me, we are just really here having an institution that we had for years, keep going. It has no vision, no direction, and no leadership. You cannot run an institution if there isn't a clear vision as to where this institution wants to go and where it wants to take its students. And we talk about the students graduating and then going away. But let us look at those that stay. What it means, a lot of them that stay, there are those who stay because they like Guyana, want to stay. But in large measure, those who got the skills and can get the opportunity go. What that means is that you are losing the best of the bad crop. If you are losing the best of a bad crop, you left me with share crop. And that is the real dilemma of what is happening in the university. Having said that, I do believe, however, the university could be turned around. Once the resources are there and you return to the basic standards of a university in terms of books, and it should be easier now. When we went to university, there was no online reading. You couldn't go online and read, and therefore you had to end up in the library or get a book. Technology, I think, has enabled us to do it at a cheaper cost and should be much easier. So, really and truly, I think the university is in problems because of the lack of vision and what I call small-mindedness in the political arena.
And if I can
Sure.
butt in here, when you spoke of the availability of courses to meet the national need, I wonder sometimes, what is the purpose of our university? We already established that we're looking towards energy security. We already established that we want to ensure that we have food security. Yet still, we still have our bias in the social sciences faculty. I think the time has come now. We realize we have a lot of sociologists, we have a lot of lawyers. I think it would be prudent, if we are seriously interested in developing our energy sector, that we increase intake in our technological department. We must be able to have our skilled personnel if we're going to develop the nation to ensure that we have energy.
Okay, sorry. Are you finished?
Yes.
Okay, while you're speaking, Brian, can you tell me what are the students' perspective on what caused this decline at the University of Guyana, and how are they responding to it? Sure, there is apathy and some malaise, but are those the only responses?
Do they have one?
I would refer to Mr. Norton's comment on the lack of the ability to, the thinking mind, the inquiring mind. I do not believe that any student largely has thought about where we are as a university, how we're solving the problem as a university, where we're going as a university, and how to stem the tide. I do not believe that largely there is any consensus of what we need to do, having seen the zombie effect, the bodies that we have up campus. I do not believe that people are affected. They're just there to finish their degrees.
Well,
unless for a few, 1 and 2 might believe, we're inspired.
But I taught there for 26 years, and you can't help feeling empathy for those 5,000 students. You can't help feeling that they should not be so shortchanged, man. There were people coming from Mahaika, Linden. That place consists of poor students trying to get up, like how Aubrey and I used UG to get up. And to see that you could carry them through 4 years of that lack of lab facilities, harsh administrative deficiencies, I mean, you have to feel for them, and you have to say to yourself, that is exploitation that should be stopped and should be confronted. I mean, you can look, most of them are between 17 and 26, man. Those are fairly young people. Those are people at that age. If you damage them, you can damage them for life. They're living they're going 4 years to an institution where they're not happy, where they don't see happiness, where they don't see the flow of human optimism. I mean, what's going to happen? Seriously, when they reach in their 30s, they're going to be unhappy people. And I think that is the the evil that UG perpetuates in our young people. And it has to stop. It must stop. We have to do something with UG. I mean, we have to. It's too priceless an institution.
Okay, we've established similarities between the situation at University of Guyana and Critchlow Labour College, but we haven't talked about the attitude of the students at the Critchlow Labour College. Are they the same in terms of their lack of inquiring minds?
Look at Aubrey Norton as the Vice Chancellor.
So that's not possible.
I wouldn't run down the road to say that. One of the things we intend to do shortly is to run some seminars with them, because what you find is that they come and you make assumptions about what they know,
yes,
but they don't know. The people at Critchlow Labour College, I think, need career guidance.
Yes.
They need to be, well, there are a number of things that we've started to do with them in terms of their assignments must be on time, how they prepare for exams, etc. But we need to do a lot more training to enable them to understand what is required of them as students and to help them to even study. I was saying to a group of students who said to me that from the time I pick up a book, I want to sleep. So I said to them that if you pick up any good book on education, they suggest to you that when you have that problem, what you do is you study the first thing when you wake up. So I'm saying the basics, a lot of the students don't know, and we have got to put it in place. Now, as it relates, for instance, to the English language, we have been ensuring that they master comprehension, composition writing, and basic English, because you really need to solve that problem. And that is why, while the other courses are one semester, English, 3 courses are both semesters: English, mathematics, and information technology. So I believe there is potential. But Critchlow is no different because it is taken from the wider society. People who, you take in at Critchlow, people who have 2 or 3 CXC. But you still have got to teach them to write when they should have learned that in the school system. So it's a challenge, and we can over a period address it. But it is not true to believe that just because of the presence of Norton. What I will do is to ensure that the rules are applied. They have to study, they have to do what they have to do, but it's not automatic. It will take some time before you get in the professional courses. However, where people come at a working, etc., I think we've been able to impact on them in terms of their approaches to the courses.
Okay, one of the biggest aims of the Cuffy 250 committee is the encouragement of self-activity. Get up and do things for yourselves. So as we conclude this evening's program, what I want to hear from each of our panelists is what are some of the things that you think citizens themselves, students themselves at the University of Guyana, at Critchlow Labour College can do to improve the situation at their tertiary level institutions?
Well, one of the things, there seems to be a trend, and I know it's innocent, and a lot of the people in the Ghana Day Committee, Coffee 250, those are people I consider friends and colleagues. But I noticed there's a direction. I went to one the other day in West Bank. I was supposed to go to this one this evening. Although I take the point that you have to tell youths, particularly the African Guyanese who are facing some terrible times, that look, you have to take initiative, don't depend on the state, what have you. My attitude to that is that the state is a national entity. The state belongs to us. The state is national property. You got to be careful how you tell African Guyanese, look, stop relying on the state. Rely on your community, rely on your own initiative. You can in fact get them to believe that the state is a stranger to them, and they can in fact forget about the state. The state belongs to us. Therefore, we have to capture the state to make the state serve its nationalist and its developmental goals. And I went to one of those meetings where I heard one of the speakers say clearly, stop relying on the government to do this and the government to do that for you. The government is us. The government is the government of the people of Guyana. Therefore, we must stop the government from using the state for narrow purposes. So if I go to a classroom and I meet these students, I would say to them, keep the consciousness that Guyana belongs to you and national institutions belong to you, and therefore you must see those institutions serving the best interests of all our people.
Thank you, Mr. Kissoon. Brian?
I've always believed that some of the greatest things that can be done, the greatest movements, started as from the smallest unit, the smallest group. And I believe at the university level that the onus is on us, the few, those who understand, those who see the problem and recognize the problem, those of us who still inquire. The onus is on us to find the spark in our colleagues. The onus is on us to engage them, to draw out from them that inquiry. So, in as much as we might be tempted to follow the crowd, we have a responsibility to educate. We have a responsibility to nurture, to foster that inquiry, lest we actually contribute. We see the problem and we just contribute by allowing it to continue. So I believe at a small group level that we need to impact and affect our colleagues, and that, I'm convinced, will snowball. Because it isn't a lost cause. It's been there for a while. But the tide can be stemmed, and there can be correction.
I agree in large measure with Freddie, though I put it slightly different. I say that there's a role for the state, and we must ensure the state perform that role. But as individuals, we have got to make ourselves self-sustaining. So I agree with Freddie and the Cuffy 250 that you need to get people involved in sustainable activity, but they must not lose sight of the fact that the government has an obligation to the people, and they should put every pressure to ensure that that is thing. But most importantly, I believe that we have got to encourage people to develop a vision of where they want to go, and then develop a plan and implement it with the aim of improving themselves. I do believe in self-reliance, but I also know that it has to be facilitated by the state and the society. And so, to me, the fundamental problem we face at this stage is that up until the late 80s, we had political consciousness. The era of Burnham and Jagan, later Rodney, there was a lot of political consciousness raising. When Desmond Hoy took over, he changed the direction of the country, which I don't have a problem with. The process of democratization began. But there isn't the concomitant raising of the political consciousness, so that people know what is a democracy and what is their role in a democracy, and fight for it. In other words, we have launched ourselves into a democracy, but without training the people in the society to protect democratic rights, to fight the democratic rights, and ensure that institutions operate and leaders operate within the context of democracy.
Thank you, Mr. Norton. Thank you, Mr. Kissoon, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Norton for being on this evening's program under the theme Education Still Matters, where we discussed the state of education in Guyana and what needs to be done about it. Viewers, thank you for watching. The Coffee 250 Committee wants you to remember continually, education still matters. Please like our Facebook page, Coffee 250, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Coffee 250, for videos of the show. Please donate to the cause. Please send us an email, coffee250gy@gmail.com. This has been African Drums, the television organ of the Coffee 250 Committee, an organization dedicated to the empowerment of the African Guyanese community through education and the encouragement of self-activity. I am Elsie. Please tune in next week.